platforms would be your favorite football or baseball or soccer team. Well, that then puts you in the category of the algorithms that would be sent male and masculinity-oriented algorithmic content. Not necessarily because you want that, because they figure out who you are and how old you are, and they know you're susceptible to this. You also see this on sort of the big social media platforms that can tell you're a boy, they can tell that what you're interested in, could be sports, could be body image, whatever. So it's really unwitting, and the problem is it can really hit hard on teenage kids and make them feel inadequate, insecure, not living up. And also it tells them a lot of times the content will say, you don't be tough, don't express emotion, don't be vulnerable, really negative messages. And the truth is, it's being sent by social media platforms to make money.
And there's also a victim story in a lot of those messages that are being sent out that make them right for, or find them right to be taken advantage of. I wonder if we can get your take on this. I was struck by some comments from the Prime Minister of Denmark announcing plans yesterday that they want to put forth a ban for social media for kids under 15. I mean, look, that sounds good. We saw what happened in Australia not long ago. The reality is, as the parent of two teenage boys, they can get around anything. How realistic is something like a social media ban?
Well, Erica, great question. First of all, I was just in Denmark meeting with those folks, and we were in Australia recently with the folks. I agree with you that kids and your kids and mine, teenagers, can get around most things. But it sends a powerful message to them about the kind of content they're being exposed to and what it's doing to their mental health. So I would agree with you that your teenagers, and probably mine and many other viewers, can get around some of those bans, right? But actually, I think it's a very powerful public education message to the boys themselves and to kids in general, but also to their parents and educators. We need to hold these platforms accountable. There is a tremendous amount of mental health crisis going on in this country, boys and girls, and quite frankly for adults, that relates to the social media platforms. So we need to pass regulations like that. The ones that you're mentioning in Denmark and Australia are examples, but there's critical bills sitting on Governor Gavin Newsom's desk in California on the same topics. So this is an issue that all Americans care about. It's not a political issue, Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. It's a family issue, a teenager issue, and the platforms have been getting away with some really offensive and inappropriate algorithmic content for years. It's about time they were held accountable, period.
Jim Steyer, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to see you guys.
Ahead, have you ever wondered what chemicals you might be exposed to on a daily basis? We tracked 3 of our CNN reporters on 3 different continents, and the results are alarming.
I started noticing, I guess it was in the mid-'80s. Hang on one second.
Paycheck, or even having part of that one paycheck missing, can be detrimental to someone's family or way of life. So and what's particularly more concerning about this week coming up here, excuse me, is the fact that the Atlanta area schools are going on to fall break. So that extra money that I would have had to, maybe pay for a sitter or daycare or buy extra groceries because the kids will be at home, I don't have that. So that's a major concern right now that I have for my members.
And Katie, that economic anxiety is only going to be amplified next week when Atlanta public schools go into fall break. A lot of these TSA agents are parents, and they're going to have to choose between taking out loans to pay for childcare or calling in sick so they can take care of your children. Katie.
All right, Alex, Ariel, thank you very much. Still ahead, what the Fed is likely to do with interest rates, according to newly released minutes from last month's meeting.
What I was going to say is that whenever I was growing up in my teens, people could legally drink across the board at the age of 18. Well, something happened to the maturity of these young kids now, to the degree that now they're no longer accountable like they was back in the 60s, in the 70s, because they changed all that. I believe it was somewhere around the mid 80s in making it illegal to drink until you're 21. In other words, their capability of responsibility of being responsible had already started diminishing back in the mid 80s of those that was born basically in the late 70s or whatever, you know, maybe a little bit before that. But the fact of the matter is, we have seen a decline in the mental stability and the mental growth. And as far as I'm concerned, this AI, artificial intelligence stuff pertaining to social media, is only enhancing that problem. And the reason why it's enhancing that problem is because now you don't have to go to a library and dig up a book and hunt and read and cram and read and cram. Now it's just as easy as just picking up your phone and saying, well, let me have a dictionary on so-and-so and so-and-so, and let me see what this is all about. It's at their disposal. In other words, they really don't even have to have a creative mind anymore, or they don't even have to have a lot of self-will anymore towards going and doing what they're going to do, because now it's at their own disposal. It's at their own convenience. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like that a lot of the kids growing up today, they feel like that they're entitled to all these amenities out there. And whenever we was growing up as children, we wasn't entitled to nothing. You either earned it by picking up bottles or hauling hay or doing whatever for a farmer around here, or you didn't get it. That was the bottom line. You either earned it or you didn't get it. It wasn't no entitlements. And there's been a drastic mental illness in this country, and I don't know, it may be worldwide, pertaining to how kids now at the age of 18 are still acting like they're 14 and 15. Or how people that are in their late, early to mid 20s are still acting like they're 17 and 18. I mean, something's clicked, and it's been in a negative sense towards people no longer feeling responsible and liable, and it really goes back to prophecy towards the Bible saying that in the last days that they will be disobedient to parents and disrespectful to the authority figures.
The NBC senior economics reporter Steve Leisman, who's at the Federal Reserve for us. Steve, what did those minutes tell us?
Well, remember, this was the meeting where they cut for the first time since the prior December. And it said they're probably going to cut some more, but there's a big debate going on at the Fed over how much these interest rates right now are actually holding back the economy. They look at the booming stock market and they say, wait a second, some say anyway, we're not that restrictive. In general, they're agreed to bring rates lower, but there's a good debate over this idea of inflation's been a little elevated because of tariffs, unemployment been a little bit weaker, so the Fed has sort of conflicting signals on both sides. And Katie, as you know, it's difficult for the Fed to figure out what to do in normal times. Of course, now it's guiding the economy without the government data that it relies on to figure out what's been going on.
It doesn't have the government data, yes, but what else do they use during the shutdown? They have other sources, right?
They have other things. They collect some private data. They look at private credit card data that looks at spending, or that gives us an idea of spending. There are private payroll companies that collect data about job growth. There isn't, importantly, really very good alternative inflation data. In most of these cases, the government data is the best thing around. There are alternatives that can help if you put them all together and say, what's the picture that it paints? But the big thing is you can kind of get a feel for the job side of the equation. It's a lot harder to get a feel for the inflation side of the equation.
All right, Steve Leisman, really good to have you. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to watch and see what happens next. Sit tight. The next hour of Katie Tur Reports starts.
Putting chemical pollutants in the air, whether that's my gas stove or things from a construction site. It made me realize how many construction sites I pass through on a daily basis.
What do we pick up?
You got a lot of chemical exposure, unfortunately.
Really?
Everything that we looked for, we found.
All of our samples included flame retardants and UV stabilizers, an alphabet soup of BPA, BPF, BPS, and around 24 chemicals on each of our bands.
And then the most important one I would say that everyone should know is called phthalates.
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 It's spelled with a PH.
It is the worst way to spell it. It's like an alphabetical mess. But phthalates are super important because when we first looked at them, they're everywhere.
Phthalates are what makes plastic moldable and flexible. They're more regulated in Europe than Asia, and Jesse's levels are a bit higher than Laura's. But it is so common globally, it's long been known as the everywhere chemical. They are also endocrine disruptors, which hack human hormones and cause problems from cradle to grave, from fertility and child behavior to depression, cancer, and cardiovascular disease.
The studies have shown about 100% of Americans have phthalates in their body. And it's so ubiquitous, it's everywhere. If you look around your room and your house, your clothes are made of plastics, your furniture is made of plastics, everything's getting turned into plastics. But by 2060, like about 35 years from now, we're going to have 4 times more plastic on the planet than we have today.
Wow. Bill Weir, CNN New York.
Can you only imagine that? 4 times more plastic than what we have now.
Comes to a ceasefire in Gaza said to be, quote, very close, perhaps even coming in the next day or so. And we could get some more details from the president this hour.
Plus a shutdown slowdown. Sickouts may be impacting air travel across the United States as more air traffic control staff call out sick. After 1 week, lawmakers are making no progress on reopening the government. And whatever happened to Amelia Earhart? A new order from the White House looks to shed light on the disappearance of the iconic trailblazing pilot. We're following these major developing stories and many more, all coming your way right here on CNN News Central.
Can you only imagine having 4 times more plastic than what we have now? That's just almost unfathomable that could actually come into play. I mean, I guess it could, but still, my God.
Egypt. And Israel's chief negotiator, Ron Dermer, has also now joined those indirect talks with Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups as efforts are intensifying here to finalize a deal based on President Trump's 20-point peace plan. CNN's Jeremy Diamond is in Tel Aviv with a closer look. So this is actually moving very quickly. Jeremy, what more do we know in terms of where things stand?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And notably, the optimism that we had heard beginning this past weekend has continued and frankly seems to be intensifying, with sources now telling me and my colleague Tal Shalev that it appears that it could come together within the next 24 to 48 hours. This is according to 2 Israeli sources and 1 additional source familiar with the negotiations, all of whom are saying that things are going in the right direction in order for this deal to be closed and signed by the 2 parties by the end of this week. 1 Israeli official even said that the Israeli government has started to work on a preliminary draft of the ceasefire resolution that would have to go before the Israeli cabinet in order to for this deal to be approved and move forward. That's because in order to release Palestinian prisoners in exchange for those 48 hostages, that will require a cabinet vote by the Israeli government. Of course, all of the usual caveats still very much apply. A deal is not final until everything has been agreed to. But again, the momentum is going in the right direction. We've seen all the right signals of progress, not only from our sources, but also from what we're seeing on the ground. Today, we saw the Qatari Prime Minister, we saw Jared Kushner, we saw Steve Witkoff, Ron Dermer, all of them arriving in Sharm el-Sheikh in order to move these negotiations forward. And we had been told that their presence was another indication of the progress that has been made and the fact that we are now in the final stretch of these negotiations. And so tonight, for the first time in a very long time in the region, there is a lot of hope, both in Israel and in Gaza.
There's also, Jeremy, we're learning that Israel believes Hamas may not be able to return all of the hostages. Specifically, I'm talking about some of the hostages who are no longer living. They may not be able to return their remains. What more do we know about that? And that they're concerned that that could delay what we're seeing here.
That's right. Well, this is according to 3 Israeli sources telling us that the Israeli government now assesses that Hamas may not be able to find and return all of the bodies of the deceased hostages who are still being held in Gaza. And it's important to remember that of the 48 hostages still being held, 28 of them are assessed to be dead by the Israeli government. The Israeli government is aware of the fact that Hamas may not be able to return those bodies. It's unclear how that's going to factor into the negotiations, whether that's something Israel will use as leverage to get other concessions from Hamas, the fact that they won't be able to return all of the bodies. Important to note as well that among those 28 deceased hostages still being held in Gaza, there are the bodies of 2 American citizens, Itai Chen and Omer Nutra. Both of them were serving as Israeli soldiers when they were abducted into Gaza on October 7th.
Jeremy, really appreciate the update. Thank you. Boris?
President Trump ratcheting up the tension with state and local leaders in Illinois over federal troop deployments to Chicago, now calling for the jailing of the state's governor and the city's mayor. Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson are suing the Trump administration over the planned activations, which they call unlawful and invasions. In a crucial hearing on the matter, I should say, is set for tomorrow. Meantime, hundreds of Texas National Guardsmen are standing by some 50 miles outside of the Windy City. Let's get right to CNN's Priscilla Alvarez for more. Priscilla, so what happens next?
Well, as you mentioned there, Boris, the hearing is where we expect to at least start to get more fleshed out arguments from both Illinois and Chicago, as well as the government, in terms of what is to happen next with this deployment. Now, as you mentioned there, this lawsuit alleges that it is both, quote, unlawful and dangerous, the action that the Trump administration is taking. And it also comes on the heels of other similar lawsuits that have been filed in California as well as in Oregon regarding deployments in those cities. If you recall, most recently, federal judge blocked the deployment of those troops in Portland. So today, when the Illinois Governor Pritzker was asked about this by reporters, he said, quote, "We have to rely on our courts," and he cited what happened in Portland. Now, we don't know what the federal judge is ultimately going to rule on this lawsuit, but the hearing tomorrow should advance this as these arguments are made before the judge. Now, the expectation here in terms of what these guard would do in Chicago is that they would serve as facility protection. This is according to Gregory Bavino. I spoke with him yesterday in Chicago. He is the Homeland Security official who is charged with the federal immigration enforcement actions, both in Chicago, but then also previously Los Angeles. And he told me that he expects that these troops would help serve as a perimeter around their federal facilities so that their agents can continue immigration arrests in Chicago. Now, we also had a discussion about racial profiling. He's been accused of that in these immigration arrests, both in Chicago as well as Los Angeles, and he stood by the conduct of his agents, saying that a myriad of factors is what goes into any arrest, and that that they base that on reasonable suspicion. So he pushed back on critics that say that these arrests are happening on the basis of race. But he also said that he would not be abiding by a new executive order by the Chicago mayor, who said that there were going to be signs put up in the city that essentially block immigration enforcement on city property. Well, Bavino was not having it. Take a listen.
We go anywhere where that threat is, and if they're going to create a sanctuary, I just said that, another sanctuary behind signs, and we'll go behind the signs and ensure that it's not a sanctuary. What a pipe dream that Mayor Johnson has filled the heads of some of his constituents with. What a pipe dream that is. We're going anywhere we need to go.
So that gives you a sense of some of the tensions on the ground there in Chicago between local officials and federal agents as they continue the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. More answers again about what is to happen with these troops moving forward in that critical hearing tomorrow.
We will be watching it closely. Priscilla Alvarez, thank you so much. Still to come, former FBI Director James Comey arraigned in federal court. Hear how his defense team plans to fight the charges. Plus, an arrest is made in the deadly Palisade.
you need to look for a way in which both parties can come together and both parties can save face. I think this is a possibility. Everybody I have talked to has reacted to this in a very positive way. And so, again, you make those subsidies apply to those people who really need it. The Republicans say, okay, we got something. The Democrats say, and we've got something too because we've renewed the subsidies. That could lead to an end to this. Over time, it doesn't necessarily mean that however it looks today is how it's going to be tomorrow. This whole shutdown dance today you look great, and tomorrow the whole public turns against you. So it's in the best interest of both parties to try to get this resolved, and particularly in the best interest of people who really are dependent on this in order to have health insurance.
Senator Boxer, what do you think of that?
Well, I think John Kasich is the one who has always tried to reach out to the other side. And in all my years in the Senate, that's what you have to do to get things done. But when the House goes on vacation, you don't get anything done. This is insanity. And I hate shutdowns. I went through 5. They're awful. But I would say there are some times when it's a righteous cause, a righteous issue. And I would say here, the people aren't dumb. They see the secret police were funded. That's ICE. And they're going out and doing their job, which seems to be hurting people who don't deserve it, like members of the clergy getting sprayed with some kind of poisonous spray, little children being tied up, but they can't have time to take care of health care. And they also took care of the billionaires. The billionaires, they're doing great. They don't need a tax cut. So Republicans took care of that, but they can't take care of working people. And so this is a righteous shutdown. And I will say this, if there were more Republicans like John Kasich, and I talked to Ron Wyden yesterday, who was the ranking member there in that finance committee, this could get resolved. But right now, unless you have more Marjorie Taylor Greene speaking out, which I give her great credit for, what she found her compassion because it's going to hit her own family. And I've seen that happen in my years where there's a little bit of a compassion missing from people, maybe on both sides of the aisle when it comes to issues, but if it hits their people, their families, their communities, they see the light. So I think this could get done. It could get done John's way, or frankly, it could get done with a long shutdown. Very last point, when I was there, it was really hard on federal employees because you had to vote to get them their back pay. Ironically, it was Trump who signed a bill to make sure they will all get paid. So at least they have that, where we didn't have that before.
All right, Jake, is that a possibility? Are you hearing about anything like that on Capitol Hill?
The governor makes a point. The eventual agreement will look something like what Governor Kasich said. It will. They will change the income levels. They will narrow the program, and they will tighten it. But Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is dug in so deep to "we will not talk while the government is shut down" that I don't know how he reverses from that right now. I mean, this is what he's been saying every single day with every breath he has around every corner of this building. The leadership thinks, Johnson, Scalise, Emmer, their teams believe that there's about 30% of Republicans who want a deal on these subsidies. 30%. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're misjudging. MTG has taken, she's not in line with the Republican Party on a bunch of things, notably the Epstein resolution and this. She is not a harbinger for where the hardline right is on Capitol Hill. She's just not.
No, she's not, but she is an interesting rabble-rouser, and she brings attention to her causes. And if you need to bring attention to it, I think the Democrats would be happy to get somebody like her to help them with that.
But for sure, the only way this gets solved, let me just say this and then I'll kick it back to everyone else, is Donald Trump needs to say, I need a deal.
That's exactly what I was going to go to Ashley Parker with. Ashley, is Donald Trump close to saying that? Is that even a whisper in the White House?
It is absolutely a whisper in the White House, but it is moving slower than you might expect. I heard a couple days ago from a very senior White House person that they thought this was going to get solved by basically the White House in conjunction with Republicans sort of offering Democrats a deal and a package on subsidies that would be discussed as soon as the government was opened, which is, as Jake might say, sort of how you might expect this to end, and what the income levels are and what the program looks like might be discussed and tweaked. But that was a few days ago, so it's something they were thinking about. It's something they were talking about. It's also something they had expected would happen by now, and it hasn't.
Yeah. All right, Senator. Did I hear you wanting to jump in? You have 30 seconds.
Okay, what will it take for these Republicans to come to the table? Public sentiment? And how about the election in Fairbanks? You may say, what? What does that have to do with it? Well, for 12 years, Republicans held the mayor's seat there. And yesterday, the Democrat won. And that will start to speak to Republicans. I've seen them fold before. I've seen Democrats fold before. But public sentiment is everything.
That's a good point. And on public sentiment, healthcare, the ACA, affordable healthcare has been kryptonite, as I said before, to the Republican Party. That's why they lost the midterms during Donald Trump's first term. Governor Kasich, you have 15 seconds, my friend. I'm getting yelled at.
The Democrats would acknowledge that if they get a deal, that the Democrats will vote for it, because there are a lot of Republicans that think that if their deal is done, that that the Democrats won't be there, and there will only be a handful of Republicans. So I think the first time that Democrats can signal we can reach a compromise here, we'll back it. And if there's a handful of Republicans or a lot of Republicans that don't want to go for it, fine. But the ones that will have enough to get this done and get to 218.
All right, Governor, Senator, Jake and Ashley, everybody, thank you. Governor, don't go too far. We're going to keep you around a little bit later. Still ahead, what could cause the DOJ's case against James Comey to fall apart even before it gets to...
Okay, we're going to go to something else different here because of the urgency of everything that's going on. So if you don't mind, please bear with me as I get my camera set up, because I haven't never really done this as far as exchanging. Let me see if I can do it. Hopefully I can. It's awful low. Well, you can tell I'm not a camera person when it comes to doing stuff like this. Oh, wrong way. Wrong way. Okay. Supposed to be there. Just don't run at it. Okay. Alright, let's see here. I want you to listen to Barney, because the message that he's got is very important. Please listen.
Keep the government open and serve the needs of the American people. Americans know Republicans have a majority in the House and in the Senate, and they also control the White House. They run the government. Republicans have the responsibility, therefore, to keep the government open. My understanding is that there will be a vote tomorrow on a continuing resolution to fund the government until November 20th. In the House, a simple majority wins, and I would imagine that by a very slim vote, Republicans will have the votes they need in order to pass their resolution. In the Senate, however, the rules are different, historically different. In order to pass a continuing resolution, it will take a 60-vote majority to pass. That means that at a time when there are 53 members of the Republican caucus and 47 members of the Democratic caucus, it will require bipartisan support. That's what Senate rules are about. In other words, Republicans will need Democratic and/or independent votes. I am an independent, in order to keep the government open. Bottom line, Republicans will need to negotiate. That's how the Senate works, and that is how democracy works. Speaking for myself, and I believe many millions of Americans, here is some of what it will take to get my vote. Number one, Republican leadership. Don't take away health care from 15 million Americans by making the largest cut to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in history. Number two, Republican leadership. Don't increase health insurance premiums by 75% on average for over 20 million Americans who get their health care through the Affordable Care Act. Number three, Republican leadership. Do not undermine modern medicine and the health and well-being of our children by rejecting the scientific evidence regarding vaccines. Number four, Republican leadership. Do not allow our great country to be moved toward authoritarianism by putting federal troops on city streets without a request from a governor or a mayor. Do not have ICE agents snatch people off our streets without due process. Do not undermine the Constitution of the United States and the rule of law by allowing an administration to refuse to spend money appropriated by the Congress. Let me be more specific. Mr. President, as I think almost every American understands, our current health care system is dysfunctional, it is broken, and it is cruel. At a time when we spend almost twice as much per capita on health care as any other major country, over $14,000 per person, 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. 85 million Americans. The Republican continuing resolution in the House does nothing to prevent 15 million Americans from being thrown off the health care they currently have as a result of Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. In other words, instead of lowering the number of uninsured and underinsured, if we do not act, 15 million more Americans will be uninsured. We cannot allow that to happen. This is a life and death issue. Studies have shown that up to 50,000 Americans every year will die unnecessarily if we do not reverse these cuts. So what we're talking about here, if we do not act, going from 85 million uninsured and underinsured to 100 million uninsured and underinsured. Those cuts must be rescinded. But Mr. President, it is not just preventing 15 million Americans from losing their health insurance. Everybody in this country, every business person, every union worker knows that the cost of health care in this country today is astronomically high and unaffordable. I don't care what state you are in. People cannot afford health care today. And yet, if we do not act right now in this continuing resolution, the Affordable Care Act tax credits will expire and premiums will skyrocket by 75% on average.
Good God.
For more than 20 million Americans. Let me repeat. Healthcare premiums for 20 million working class and middle class Americans will go up by 75% on average if we do not extend those tax credits in this coming legislation. And let me say I wish very good luck to my colleagues, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, who want to go home to their constituents and explain why health care premiums are going up by 75% in order to pay for $1 trillion in tax breaks for the 1%. I do wish you the best of luck in trying to explain that one. I do not intend to. Further, Mr. President, let me be clear. Vaccines work. Not exactly a controversial statement. A statement supported by every major medical organization in the United States and around the world. Vaccines are safe, they are effective, and they have saved millions of lives in our country and tens of millions of lives worldwide. In fact, vaccines are one of the greatest public health achievements in modern history. At a time when the Secretary of Health and Human Services has dismantled the vaccine review process, narrowed access to life-saving COVID vaccines, fired leading public health experts, and filled scientific advisory boards with conspiracy theorists and ideologues, we must stand with the scientific and medical communities and rescind Secretary Kennedy's dangerous policies. This is not about politics. Doesn't matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. We are talking about protecting our children from polio, measles, whooping cough, and other preventable diseases. Mr. President, the American people, slowly but surely, are catching on. No matter what their political view may be, Democrat, Republican, Independent, they understand that our current economic system is rigged. They understand that the very richest people in this country are becoming much richer, while 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And millions of people are trying to survive on starvation wages. The American people understand that while billionaires are getting huge tax breaks, they are finding it harder and harder to afford health care, to pay the rent or their mortgages, to afford child care, to be able to send their kids to college, to pay for the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe, or to buy decent quality food for their kids. The American people understand, painfully and depressingly, that unless we change the way the economy functions, their kids will likely have a lower standard of living than they do. In the richest country in the history of the world, it is likely that the younger generation will have a lower standard of living than their parents, while almost all new income and wealth goes to the people on the top. Mr. President, today we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of the United States. Today we have one man, Mr. Musk, who owns more wealth, if you can believe it, than the bottom 52% of American households. One man, more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households.
Think about that.
He is on his way, it appears, to become a trillionaire, even richer and richer. Today, the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%. Top 1%, more wealth than the bottom 93%.
Think about that.
And the CEOs of major corporations now earn over 350 times what their average employees make. While the billionaire class becomes richer and richer, real inflation accounted for weekly wages are lower today than they were 52 years ago. Huge expansion of worker productivity, and yet the average worker in many cases is worse off than he or she was 52 years ago. Mr. President, enough is enough. At a time of...
I want to comment on what he just said 52 years ago. I know that kind of seems kind of off the wall a little bit, but the bottom line is this. I think the minimum wage back then, 50 years ago, was probably, give or take, around $2.30, $2.70, something like that. But in comparison to the minimum wage, the standard minimum wage now, I think it's $7.35 or $7 something. That same $7, let's say you go to work at a company and you're only getting paid $7 something an hour, or they give you a little bonus and you make $8 an hour. In comparison to the minimum wage 52 years ago, that was $2 and I think 35 cents an hour. I may be wrong about that. You have less money to spend because of the high prices on distributing your money out and getting more items. You have less making the $7 and something an hour than what you did whenever you was only making $2 and something an hour. So what's happened here, we've seen a dramatic decrease pertaining to the imbalances. And now it's gotten to the point that the poorest of the poor basically don't even have a snowball chance, and you know what, towards ever making it, much less making it to the top. Why? Because of all the greed, because of all the selfishness. Now, there's no doubt, if I'm going to go to work for somebody, I'd rather go to work for somebody knowing that they do have a little bit of money, regardless whether they be somebody as rich as Elon Musk or another company. I want to go to work for a strong company, but at the same time, I don't want that company to stifle me or to take advantage of me or to basically rate me to the degree that now it's actually cheaper for me to stay at home than it would be for me to go to work. Kind of like your daycare centers now. They request about $400 or $500 per child of babysitting. Well, what good does it do for a mother to go to work for $7 an hour, wearing out the vehicle plus gas, plus her time, and at the end of the week, she didn't make as much money as what the girl did, or man, whoever it was, babysitting the baby, and all they got to do is just sit there basically and watch the kids. everything is unproportionately out of balance. And whenever it gets this way, it becomes very, very frightful to the degree that you're asking for an uprise. You're asking for problems that's going to be initiated, similar towards what went on with the uprising of January the 6th here in America, that probably out of all the people that got arrested, or let me put it this way, out of all the people that was there that day, including those that got arrested, probably 95% of them never would have been in that predicament if the big wheels, if the money makers, if the ones in charge would have kept things in check. Because things are not in check, you motivated a group of people towards going up there. And not only did you motivate a group of people towards going up there because the system being broken and the swamp being even more swampier, but you motivated them into violence. Because there's nobody willing to sit down on pencil and paper or chalkboard and say, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. Now, there's no doubt, ever since the beginning of time, every time mankind makes a change, it not only causes disturbances, but it causes resistances to the degree that some changes has actually developed over into war. Whenever the railroad system come in, there was a lot of bloodshed over the railroad system coming in because it was going to affect a lot of people's lives that was already dependent upon that type of livelihood in exchange towards not having a railroad. Well, now all of a sudden you're going to bring the railroad in. Now all of a sudden those people's jobs, their careers are at stake. And because of it, it causes people to go bankrupt. It causes people to go broke. It causes hardships into people's lives. Even with barbed wire that they started putting all over America, I guess in the 1700s, that in and of itself caused bloodshed. Because up until that time, you could graze on any piece of property that you wanted to until people started fencing off their property and putting up barbed wire. Anytime there's a change, it creates problems. Problems that society ordinarily will be able to work their way out. But in this case, and this was coming out of this man's mouth right here that I just got the recording right there, part of it, that AI, whenever AI fully becomes effective in not only America but throughout the world, it's going to basically put about 40% of the labor force right now in lope mode, to the degree that it's going to be that much harder to be able to find a common, ordinary, everyday job unless you do have a very good skill, or unless you do have a lot of education, depending upon what you're involved in. But you take 40% of 8 billion people, that's a lot of people that you're going to basically do away with in the next 7, 8, 10 years from now, simply because of all this automated this and automated that and robot this and robot that. I've said all along that there was good and bad in what they've designed and created pertaining to AI and social media, with your automotive industry, etc., building cars with robots and welding cars with robots and etc. But there comes a time that you're going to have to make decisions towards who's going to actually put out the fires working for the fire department, who's actually going to work on those cars that gets involved in major accidents, who's going to build those houses and wire those houses and pour that concrete and put in that piping. Because there are certain things that the robot's not going to be able to achieve. In other words, what's coming around the corner can be just as much bad as it is good. And I'm just afraid that it actually eventually will turn out to be more bad than it is good. Let's watch a little bit more of this, please.
52 years ago. Mr. President, enough is enough. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, it is insane to be giving $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%. President Trump and the Republican leadership want my vote. They will have the rescind that tax breaks for their oligarchic friends. Mr. President, our country today faces not only major economic crises. We are looking at extraordinarily a threatening moment to our democratic form of government. Frankly, we now have a President of the United States who does not believe in our Constitution and the separation of powers, who does not believe in freedom of speech and the right to dissent, who is moving us every day toward an authoritarian form of government with more and more power into his own hands. Mr. President, too many Americans from my state of Vermont and every other state in this country have put their lives on the line and sometimes died in order to defend democracy and our way of life. The right of people to live without fear. The right of people to express their point of view, no matter what it may be. You disagree with me? That's great. That's called American democracy. The right of people to vote without intimidation. Mr. President, today, in an unprecedented way, we have federal troops in...
I want to say something. He talks about our way of life. That's the whole concept in behind what we're fixing to have to face off on, is because we've had all these different administrations, beginning with the Reagans and the Bushes, that basically wanted to do their own thing. And they started compromising, started kicking the can down the road, whenever it come to the debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling up, compromising. And basically, this government spoiled its own citizens. I mean, literally spoiled them in comparison to the way things used to be 45, 50, 60 years ago. Well, no parent that truly loves their children wants their children to do worse than what they did. But as it stands right now, it has flipped to the degree that now our children and our grandchildren, and possibly even their children, unless we can get it turned around, are going to basically suffer and struggle more so than what we did. How did that happen? Well, the government kept giving the farm away, kept kicking the can down the road, kicking the can down the road, to the degree that now the generation growing up, the millennials or whatever they call them, they feel like that they're entitled to all these entitlements, that those entitlements didn't exist 45, 50, 60 years ago. We have brought this upon to ourselves by the hypocrites and the